When Natalie Pierce stepped into the sleek, glass-paneled high-rise that crisp November evening, she carried more than just a carefully packed dinner. She carried hope, joy, and the gentle flutter of new life inside her. Every step she took echoed with a quiet determination, a reflection of her devotion to her husband Lucas. But she never imagined the devastating truth waiting behind those glossy doors. Inside the executive suite, Natalie's heart raced with anticipation, completely unaware that her world was about to fall apart. Everything she thought she knew about her marriage would be upended in the next few minutes. Natalie had always believed love could weather anything. She and Lucas had met during their junior year at Boston University. He studied economics and she pursued creative writing. From the start, they seemed like opposites that somehow fit perfectly. Natalie's warm, outgoing nature balanced Lucas's focused, intellectual demeanor. They married 3 years after graduation, and guests at the wedding said they were soulmates. Over time, Natalie watched Lucas climb the ranks at Montgomery & Keene Asset Management, working long hours, starting early, and finishing late. Eventually, he earned the role of Senior Portfolio Director, a prestigious title, but one that demanded near constant attention. While Lucas immersed himself in meetings, market trends, and deadlines, Natalie began writing human stories as a freelancer, many of which appeared in Boston publications like the Herald-Beacon. She didn't mind Lucas's hectic schedule. She felt proud to support him. Her writing, her social circle, and her independence kept her fulfilled. Their relationship grew even stronger when Natalie discovered she was expecting. They'd discussed having children someday, but neither had thought it would happen so soon. Still, Lucas had seemed thrilled, or at least that's what he showed outwardly. In the early months, he made room in his calendar for doctor visits, read parenting guides at night, and smiled warmly as her belly expanded. With each passing week, Natalie's affection for him deepened. She was ready to move from being his partner to the mother of their child. She believed their marriage was becoming even more rooted and unshakable. It never occurred to her to question his loyalty. Yet subtle shifts began to emerge. Lucas took more late-night calls, whispering into the phone behind closed doors. Suddenly, urgent trips for work popped up out of nowhere. More often than not, he'd slip into bed long after Natalie had fallen asleep, murmuring something vague about last-minute issues with investors. Trusting by nature, she didn't press. She was deeply involved in an in-depth feature for New England Monthly about unsung community champions. Then came the day. On a whim, Natalie decided to surprise Lucas with a home-cooked dinner at his office. She wanted to nourish him with both warmth and something homemade, to remind him that even in the frantic world of finance, love was waiting for him. Late October's chill swept across the Focus. She guided her car toward downtown Boston, the city skyline glimmering ahead like spilled stardust. A quiet wave of optimism washed over her. She couldn't wait to see Lucas's face light up. Grateful, surprised, moved. He'd always told her it was her small, thoughtful gestures that furthered her. And tonight, she wanted to remind him of those early days, of handwritten notes, coffee shop dates, and the way he used to look at her like she was the goth. Still, his once spontaneous texts had grown mechanical. His late returns now came with 2 neatly packaged excuses. And the laughter, she silently chastised herself for overthinking. Lucas was a committed man. He'd never given her any true reason to doubt his love. He was the man who painted the nursery ceiling stars. The one who whispered future baby names into her belly when he thought she was asleep. Even so, her mind drifted back to a strange moment 2 nights ago. Lucas had come home well past midnight, smelling faintly of a luck shoe. She'd meant to ask about it, but he had rushed into the shower, saying he and a colleague had dined with an important investor at a 5-star seafood restaurant near the harbor. She remembered hugging him afterwards and feeling a subtle distance. Something she couldn't name. Still, she had buried the thought. Natalie pulled into the visitors section of the underground garage, grabbed the dinner carefully, and glanced at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her cheeks were rosy from the wind, her light brown hair slightly tousled. She adjusted her coat, patted her bump, and stepped into the elevator leading them. The reception area was Sturt. She recognized him from earlier visits. It was strange not to see anyone else still working. Their firm had a reputation for pushing long nights and last-minute market analyses. The stillness in the air unsettled her. She wondered if Lucas had asked everyone to leave early, or maybe there was a team dinner or off-site event she hadn't heard about. Perhaps he was alone tonight, grinding through final figures for a morning presentation. Natalie inhaled deeply and reminded herself, "He's going to be so happy when he sees you." She tightened her grip on the warm food container and stepped into the elevator. It carried her to the 20th floor. When the doors opened, she stepped into a corridor lined with marble, the soft glow from the recessed lights bouncing off the floor. As she walked, each footfall seemed to grow louder, like her heart was pounding through her shoes. She stopped in front of the glass-paneled door etched with Lucas's name. Lucas Monroe, Senior Portfolio Director. She took a breath, steadying herself. The door was slightly ajar. That was odd. Lucas always locked it when he stayed late to ensure privacy. From inside, she could hear muffled voices. One of them, unmistakably, a woman's. Natalie's lips parted, confusion and unease blooming in her chest. There had to be a simple explanation. Maybe a coworker was helping him with a last-minute pitch. Gathering her composure, she turned the knob and stepped inside. The lights were low, the soft glow from a floor lamp replacing the usual overhead brightness. On Lucas's sleek walnut desk, folders and financial binders were scattered without order. The scent of rose perfume struck her instantly. Natalie stopped cold. A woman was sitting in the black leather executive chair, his chair. The one she had surprised him with on his 32nd birthday. That sight alone was unsettling, but then her eyes dropped to what the woman was wearing, an emerald silk blouse and a fitted charcoal skirt. It was unmistakably the same outfit Natalie had hung in their bedroom closet just a week ago, freshly dry-cleaned. She felt frozen in place, her mind unable to comprehend what she was seeing. Standing just behind the woman was Lucas, one hand resting on her shoulder. His tie was loosened, shirt half unbuttoned, as if he'd dressed in a rush. His face was a portrait of panic, his eyes darting between Natalie and the woman seated in the chair. The woman slowly turned to meet her gaze, wearing a smirk that radiated boldness rather than shame. Natalie would later learn her name was Camille Avery, a newly hired research analyst who had become far more than a colleague to Lucas. Natalie's body trembled from head to toe. The thermal bag slipped from her fingers and hit the floor with a soft but crushing thud. It felt symbolic, like her hopes in marriage had fallen right alongside it. Her lips shaped a question, but no sound came out. She looked to Lucas, desperate for an explanation, for any sign that this wasn't what it clearly was. His complexion had gone ghostly. He stared at her, mouth slightly agape. "Natalie," he stammered, as if just saying her name could undo it all. Camille rose with languid elegance, allowing Natalie's gaze to fall upon what she was wearing. Natalie's outfit, worn so boldly by the other woman. Lucas took a hesitant step forward, arms half raised as if to comfort her, but Natalie instinctively flinched. Tears welled up, stinging her eyes. Her shock twisted rapidly into anger. "How could you?" she demanded, her voice unsteady with fury. In a line so cliché it almost felt insulting, Lucas stammered, It's not what it looks like." The absurdity of the phrase nearly made Natalie laugh, but the bitterness caught in her throat. She could see exactly what it was. It was betrayal, cold and calculated, dressed in her own clothes and flaunted in front of her like a scene from a cruel melodrama. She may have dismissed warning signs before, but now the evidence was unmistakable. The pregnant wife, the mistress in her blouse, the husband caught in the middle. There was no mistake here. Camille, effortlessly composed even in stolen fabric, leaned back against the edge of the desk, her gaze half-lidded and cutting. "Lucas," she said, her voice smooth and unbothered, "I think it's time to tell her the truth." The audacity in her tone, the blatant absence of remorse, cut straight through Natalie's chest. She turned her focus back to Lucas and caught a glimmer of tears forming in his eyes. He reached out a trembling hand. "Natalie, please just listen," he whispered, voice breaking. "I never meant for this to get so far." "What does that even mean?" Natalie snapped. "How long has this been happening?" Before Lucas could answer, Camille stepped in coolly. "About 6 months," she said, almost smugly. The timing of her response felt calculated, like she wanted it to hurt. Natalie's eyes blazed. She turned to Lucas, expecting him to correct the timeline, to deny it, but he lowered his gaze. That silence confirmed everything. 6 months. That meant he had betrayed her almost since the beginning of her pregnancy. A wave of nausea hit Natalie so hard she had to grip the doorframe for support. Her instinct immediately shifted to the child inside her. She felt the need to protect, to shield, to survive. Lucas tried to close the distance, his voice cracking with desperation. It was a mistake. We had some late nights at the office, and I was under pressure. Camille was just there for me. His words stumbled from his mouth, sounding as hollow as they felt. Natalie stared at him, disbelief etched into every feature. Her tears threatened to spill over again. A mistake, she echoed, her voice quivering. One you've repeated for half a year, and you had the audacity to let her wear my clothes? Lucas looked cornered, ashamed, frantic, unable to form a response. Camille spoke again, uninvited. We didn't think you'd come here. Lucas told me. You were Camille's words dripped with condescension, as if Natalie's very presence was some kind of disruption. In that instant, Natalie's body screamed. Part of her wanted to flee, the other part to lash out. It felt like the air had been punched out of her lungs. Her pulse quickened, her vision blurred. Not from tears yet, but from the sheer velocity of betrayal. Her heart pounded, her thoughts spiraled. And the painful truth landed with brutal clarity. The life she'd envisioned had never been as stable as she believed. But with a child growing inside her, she knew she couldn't force. She clenched her jaw, anchoring herself to the growing life in her belly, the one innocent thing untouched by lies. Summoning us, you can keep the clothes, she said. With that, she turned and fled the office, tears streaming down her cheeks in angry, hot trails. She jabbed at the elevator buttons, nearly dropping her phone as she tried to order a cab. Her keys trembled. Her entire body was quaking, not just fur. Before she could even step inside the elevator, she heard Lucas's voice shouting behind her. Natalie, wah! He chased after her, his footsteps, but she didn't look back. Each step away from him felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. Self-preservation in motion. She reached the underground garage, her pulse still thundering in her ears. Lucas caught up, panting. Natalie, wait, we can talk this out. She turned on him, her face streaked with tears. Talk? Her voice cracked with disbelief. I saw everything, Lucas. What's left to talk about? You betrayed me and our baby. Her hand moved instinctively to her belly, guarding it. His voice wavered. I'm so sorry. I'll end it. I swear I will. I'll do anything. Just let me explain, please. But Natalie had no room for apologies. Not now. Her entire being ached with humiliation and rage. She shook her head, lips trembling. She climbed into her car. Her hands shook so violently that she had to try twice before the engine caught. Lucas placed a hand on the window, his eyes brimming with tears. She turned away and drove off into the night. In her rearview mirror, he stood alone, shrinking into shadow. By the time Natalie reached their townhouse in Arlington, her eyes were red and swollen from crying. Inside the dim living room, she collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her palms. She could feel the baby stirring, as if sensing her heartbreak, reminding her that life still moved forward, even in ruin. She wrapped her arms around her middle, whispering silently to the child. I'm so sorry, baby. The words were more breath than voice, carried on a sob she tried to swallow. Part of her wanted to call her best friend, Aaron Sanders, who had been her rock since their early teens, back in Worcester. But she felt too raw, too broken to speak. The words, Lucas is cheating on me, repeated in Natalie's mind like a cruel echo. Eventually, she gathered the strength to dial Aaron. Her best friend answered on the second ring, her voice laced with immediate concern. Without waiting for pleasantries, Natalie let the story pour out in choked, uneven bursts. The late nights, Camille's smug face, her stolen clothes. Aaron listened without interruption, and when Natalie finally fell silent, her friend responded gently but firmly. Get out of there, Nat. You can't stay in that house by yourself, not with all those memories. It'll eat you alive. I can't just leave, Natalie murmured, wiping her nose with a crumpled tissue. I'm pregnant. Where would I even go? You can come here. My place is yours, Aaron said without missing a beat. She lived a couple of hours away, but that distance suddenly felt like a lifeline. Or if you need me, I'll drive to you tonight. You shouldn't be alone. Not now. It's too much to carry by yourself, especially with the baby. Natalie was touched. but she hesitated. Everything still felt so raw. She didn't know what her next move should be. "Let me see how I feel in the morning," she whispered. Aaron promised to call again at sunrise, reminding her that no matter what she chose, she had an escape route. Morning came faster than she expected, wrapped in a dull ache and exhaustion. A narrow beam of light slipped through the half-closed curtains in her bedroom. Natalie stirred from broken sleep, her pillow damp with tears. Her phone screen lit up with missed calls and unread messages, most of them from Lucas. The earlier texts were frantic apologies, strung together with promises and declarations of love. Then came voice messages. Some sounded tearful, others desperate. She listened to one and had to stop halfway through. Lucas's voice cracked with emotion as he begged her to come home, swearing it had been a moment of weakness. She deleted it before he could finish. At 8 a.m. sharp, Aaron called. Natalie answered. Her voice was calmer now, but inside she still felt fractured, like she was trying to glue herself back together with trembling hands. She needed to decide: stay in the house and face Lucas, take a temporary step back, or walk away completely. While she spoke, her phone buzzed with a new notification, a message from an unfamiliar number. She glanced down. "This is Camille. We need to talk. Lucas is just as much to blame as I am. He didn't tell you everything. It's not entirely my fault." Natalie's hands trembled as she ended the call with Aaron. She stared at the screen in disbelief. The nerve. Camille reaching out directly. And yet, the message hinted that there was more to the story. Something she hadn't been told. Something Lucas had hidden from both of them. Perhaps, did she even want to know? For now, she ignored the text. Hearing Camille's side of anything felt unbearable. Around noon, Lucas let himself into the townhouse using his key. Natalie was in the kitchen, sipping water and nibbling toast in an attempt to keep her nausea at bay. The moment she heard the front door open, her entire body tensed. A part of her wanted to disappear upstairs, to avoid the confrontation altogether. But she held her ground. He walked in looking disheveled, unshaven, eyes rimmed red, his usually polished hair a tangled mess. "Natalie," he began softly, voice hoarse. "I'm so sorry." "Don't come near me," she warned, stepping back. The cold fire in her stare froze Lucas in place. "I don't want to hear your apologies," she continued, her voice like steel. "You destroyed my trust. You buried me in excuses for months, and now I find out you've been cheating for half a year. Why?" He exhaled heavily, shoulders collapsing under the weight of her words. "I have no excuse. I messed up. Badly." He dropped into a kitchen chair and buried his face in his hands. When he finally looked up, tears were already streaking his face. "I never meant to betray you," he said, voice raw. "It just happened, slowly, one late night at a time. I was overwhelmed, burnt out at work." Camille showed up. She listened. She understood. The heat in Natalie's eyes returned, sharper now, cutting through any remnants of sorrow. "I listened to you," she snapped. "I was your wife, Lucas. Do you even hear the irony? I supported you. I believed in you, and you ran to someone else." Her voice trembled, not from fear, but fury. "And now you expect me to feel sorry for you? Because your guilt hurts?" "It's more complicated than that," he muttered, shaking his head. "You have to understand." "No," Natalie said sharply, her voice echoing across the kitchen. She caught herself, instantly placing a protective hand over her stomach. The baby didn't deserve this. Neither did she. Lowering her voice, she added, "What else haven't you told me? Camille said you were hiding more." Lucas visibly paled at the mention of Camille's name. "She texted you?" he asked, his voice catching. Natalie gave a small, wordless nod. His eyes flickered away. Shame, maybe fear. "I don't know what she told you," he said quietly. "But whatever it was, it doesn't change how sorry I am." She could barely keep standing. Her head spun. The weight of everything was too much. "I can't do this right now," she murmured. "I need space." Lucas met her gaze, desperate. "Please, at least let me stay in the guest room. I can help. Cook, clean, be here for you, for the baby. I don't want you alone." Natalie gave a bitter laugh, eyes brimming with fresh tears. "You didn't care about the baby when you were with her," she said quietly. "Don't act like you care now." She grabbed her coat from the hook by the door and stepped out, leaving Lucas slumped over in the kitchen, broken and still. She needed air. A clear head. A breath of something that didn't smell like betrayal. Instead of driving aimlessly, Natalie went to a small cafe tucked beside the public library. a quiet spot she used to visit when she needed inspiration, when the world still made sense. The barria, her fingers trembled as she clutched the paper menu, her voice barely steady as she placed her order. Even this mundane moment felt surreal, like she was floating just above her own life, watching it unravel. With the warm mug in hand, she tucked herself into a quiet corner of the cafe, the one near the back where she used to sit when brainstorming articles. The events of the past day replayed in broken flashes: Camille's smug expression, Lucas's desperate tears, her own devastation. Her baby shifted inside her, as if sensing her unrest. She placed her hand on her belly, whispering silently, "We'll be okay," though she wasn't sure if she believed it. She was on the verge of tears when her phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. "You deserve to know. Meet me at the Beacon Lounge tonight, 7 p.m. This is bigger than just an affair. Trust me." Natalie stared at the text, heart thudding in her ears. Was she actually considering meeting Camille? Her rational mind screamed no. This was madness. But the words "this is bigger than just an affair" clawed at her curiosity and sparked unease. She couldn't let Lucas's mistress manipulate her. Yet if there was something more, something she hadn't been told, she had a right to know. Her breath hitched, her thumb hovering above the screen as conflicting emotions collided inside her: fear, rage, confusion. But mostly, she wanted answers. Her fingers hovered over her screen, then typed, "Fine, 7 p.m. The Beacon Lounge was a sleek, upscale bar perched on the 20th floor of a high-rise, offering breathtaking views of the Boston skyline. Natalie arrived 20 minutes early, her nerves like tightly wound wire. She chose a leather seat near the massive window overlooking the city. When the hostess offered her a menu, she declined and asked only for water with lemon. Her stomach had no room for food. Every time the elevator chimed, her muscles tensed. She kept one hand cradling her belly, the other gripping her water glass like an anchor. Exactly at 7 p.m., Camille Avery walked in. The picture of confidence in a curve-hugging black dress. Her hair was pinned elegantly, emphasizing her angular features. Seeing her again triggered a fresh churn of nausea. Camille approached the table with a composed smirk and slid into the chair opposite Natalie. Their eyes met, electric tension dancing between them. "You came," Camille murmured, like they were conspirators in something dark. "Cut to the chase," Natalie snapped, her tea Camille Modi. "Look, Natalie bristle. I've known Lucas for years. Know." Camille sipped her wine, her eyes gleaming. "You know the man he wants you to know." Natalie's brow furrowed. The Carrington deal was infamous in Boston's corporate world. It involved a real estate mogul named Clint Carrington, who had been at the center of a scandal involving illegal lobbying and city contracts. There had also been talk of money laundering, with a few bankers caught in the ripple effect. Natalie recalled writing a brief R. "What does Camille arched an eyebrow. "Let's just say he helped reorganize a few financial documents to keep some influential people out of trouble." Natalie's breath hitched. Her tranks. The weight of the Lucas had never mentioned anything about being involved in the Carrington deal or any related scandal. Could Camille be lying, trying to drive the wedge even deeper? "Why should I believe you?" Natalie asked. Camille took another slow sip of wine. "I have files, copies of the ones Lucas tried to bury. He never wanted them to surface, but I kept backups. For Lev," her gaze dipped toward Natalie's stomach. "He's probably not the man you think he is. I'm not saying you owe me anything, but you deserve the full truth before you decide what to do with your marriage. If you want them, I'll send you the documents." Natalie clutched her stomach protectively. Her mind reeled. How much of her life had been based on a lie? A wave of nausea rolled through Natalie. She forced herself to breathe. Lucas's late nights, his anxious moods, his odd defensiveness whenever she asked about work. It was all starting to form a darker image than she'd ever dared imagine. She stared across the table at Camille, who seemed to almost revel in this moment of control. "Why do you care if I know all this?" Natalie asked. "What's your angle?" Camille's expression shifted, just slightly. Her voice was lower now. "Lucas told me he was going to leave you, said it was just a matter of time. But he didn't. And then I found out you were pregnant. He kept calling it a complication. I realized then he was never going to keep his promises." Natalie's lips parted in stunned silence. Her worst fear, that she and the baby were never part of Lucas's plan, was being spoken aloud by the other woman. Her jaw clenched, but her words remained smooth. "So I decided, if I can't have him, maybe I'll destroy the illusion he's living in." Natalie felt a wave of revulsion, but also a strange, grim intrigue. This wasn't just an affair. This was a mess of manipulation, blackmail, and selective truths. Suddenly the baby kicked, as if urging her, "Get out." "Send me the files," Natalie said flatly, not bothering to hide the disgust in her tone. She scribbled a burner email she sometimes used for investigative work onto a napkin. "Use this." Camille smirked, slipping the note into her purse. "You'll have them by morning." She rose and adjusted her dress. "Just remember, if you think you really know him, you don't." With that, Camille stood and walked away, leaving Natalie alone in a whirlwind of horrifying implications. She returned home around 9 p.m., physically drained and emotionally threadbare. Lucas was pacing the living room when she entered. As soon as he saw her, he rushed forward. "Where were you?" he asked. Panic etched into his voice. "I was going out of my mind." Natalie brushed past him, shrugging off his attempt to reach for her. "I met with Camille," she said flatly, unbuttoning her coat. She watched his face go pale. "She told me about the Carrington deal." Lucas's expression collapsed. He dropped onto the couch and buried his face in his hands. "I was afraid she'd drag that into this," he muttered. "It was years ago. Just one project. I didn't know how deep it really was until I was already in." Natalie's voice shook with fury. "You never told me. Not once. You didn't even hint that you were tied to that mess. People went to prison over that, Lucas, and you just walked away, untouched." He let out a ragged breath, his eyes glistening. "I didn't launder money or anything illegal. I was asked to reorganize a few accounts. I only realized later it was hush money. Montgomery and Keene promoted me quietly because I didn't blow the whistle. I was scared and ambitious," he continued. "I told myself I was protecting us." Natalie's mouth parted in disbelief. "Protecting us by getting involved in something illegal? How am I supposed to believe anything you say now? You cheated on me for 6 months. You hid your connection to a corporate scandal. What else are you keeping from me?" Lucas stood quickly and reached for her hands. She recoiled. His face was pleading. "There's nothing else. That's everything. I swear." But Natalie's eyes narrowed, Camille's words echoing in her mind. "Lucas is a master at deception." "I want you out," she said, her tone sharp and unwavering. "I need time to think, but I can't do that with you here, lying to my face." Lucas shook his head, eyes wide with panic. "You're pregnant. I can't leave you alone." "Oh, now you want to be here?" she snapped. "Were you thinking about being here when Camille was wearing my clothes in your office? Don't talk to me about caring. You lost that right." Her voice dropped, but the finality in it was unmistakable. "Get a hotel. For a few nights," Natalie added firmly. "I'll let you know when, or if, you can come back." Lucas opened his mouth to argue, but the fire in Natalie's eyes silenced him. Her resolve was immovable. Eventually he packed a small duffel bag, tears streaking his cheeks. He lingered for a moment at the doorway, but when the door clicked shut behind him, Natalie let out a shaky breath, her chest tightening against a fresh swell of tears. She hadn't felt this alone in years. The next morning, Natalie awoke to a flurry of emails in the burner account she'd given Camille. The subject line read, "The truth about Lucas." With trembling fingers, she opened them. Dozens of PDF files were attached, bank statements, suspicious transactions, incriminating email threads. Her stomach turned as the pieces clicked into place. It was true. Lucas had been involved in the Carrington deal, and more deeply than he ever admitted. Several emails clearly suggested he knew the funds were tied to bribery and illegal lobbying. Each document she opened peeled away another layer of deception. He wasn't just a cheating husband. He was someone who had willingly stepped into a world of corruption and kept it hidden. Then came the string of personal emails between Lucas and Camille. They stretched over months. In them, Lucas vented about home life, about feeling trapped. He complained about Natalie's focus on the pregnancy, as if their baby was an obstacle rather than a miracle. Each word felt like a wound reopening. The final email from Camille read, "You see now, he doesn't deserve either of us. Do what you will with this. I'm done." Numb, Natalie shut her laptop. Only one person could help her think straight now, Aaron. She called her best friend immediately. her voice barely stable as she explained what she'd just read. Aaron was livid. "Natalie, pack your things. Come stay with me for a while, just until you decide what comes next," she insisted. "He's got money, influence. Don't give him a chance to twist this." Natalie hesitated. The thought of walking away from the home she'd poured herself into made her heart ache. But the betrayal, the danger, the uncertainty of staying, it was too much. That afternoon, Natalie packed a small suitcase, just a few outfits, her laptop, and prenatal essentials. She left a handwritten note on the kitchen counter. "I need time and space. Do not contact me unless it's an emergency." Then she climbed into her car and began the 2-hour drive to Worcester, to Aaron's house. A place of refuge, if only for a little while. The road ahead felt like a metaphor for Natalie's inner journey, leaving behind a life she had treasured and facing an uncertain future. When she finally pulled into Aaron's cozy bungalow driveway, the heavy By the third day, Dr. Lawson was compassionate and concerned. She advised Natalie to prioritize her emotional well-being for the baby's sake and offered to refer her to a therapist who specialized in prenatal and postpartum tea. That night, just past 3 a.m., Natalie awoke with a start. Her heart racing, throat tight, a chill on her skin despite the warm blanket. She sat up, struggling to breathe. The shadows in the corners of Aaron's guest room felt darker, heavier, like they carried her fears. She slipped out of bed and stepped out onto the small balcony, wrapping herself in a cardigan. The city beyond was still. She sat down, pressing her palm against her belly, whispering, "I don't know if I can do this alone." Her breath came in shallow gasps, but then a gentle kick from within stilled her panic. A tear traced down her belly-floor. In that call, Natalie hung up midway through it. As the days passed, she began thinking more clearly about the future. Could she raise a baby on her own? Lucas had always been the primary earner. She reached out to. After hearing the full story, Kyle didn't sugarcoat things. He recommended a reputable divorce attorney in the R. "If he goes down, Nat, it might touch your finances too. You need to prepare for that." Natalie's stomach dropped. Should she keep Hept? It was a brutal moral puzzle. No answer felt. 1 week into her stay at Aaron's, there was a knock at the door. Aaron answered and found Lucas "I just need to see her," Lucas said, voice bruh. Aaron crossed her arms firmly. She began to shut the door. She knew she couldn't avoid him forever. "Give us a minute," she said softly to Aaron. Aaron gave her a worried glance but stepped aside, letting them have the porch. Lucas looked at Natalie with pleading, broken eyes. "I'm going crazy without you," he said quietly. "I miss you, and I'm terrified." "I've lost you for good, haven't I?" Lucas looked at Natalie, his voice barely audible. She stared at him, unsure whether the emotion rising inside her was pity, rage, or something tangled in between. "I told you not to come," she said softly but firmly. "I had to," he replied, voice trembling. "I want to tell you everything. No more hiding. Please, let me explain." Natalie sighed. Part of her hated him, bitterly, but another part remembered the man she once loved, the one who brought her coffee on deadline nights and held her when storms scared her as a child. That man felt like a memory. She motioned toward a wooden bench on the porch, and they sat, an awkward, cold distance between them. Haltingly, Lucas began. He admitted his affair with Camille had started as something purely physical, but it quickly spiraled into something darker: blackmail, secrets, corporate leverage. Camille had found the Carrington files, threatening to expose him if he walked away. Terrified of losing his job, or worse, being prosecuted, Lucas said he felt trapped. Natalie wasn't sure if that was the whole truth or just another excuse. He described attempts to end things with Camille, only for her to threaten him again. At some point, he stopped fighting it. He began to seek her out of need, he claimed. For comfort. For escape. Natalie listened, stunned. Her fists clenched, nails cutting into her palms. "So you stayed with her because she blackmailed you," she said, her voice ice. "And because what? You liked it?" Lucas nodded, tears sliding freely down his cheeks. "I was weak," he whispered. "Selfish. But I never stopped loving you or our baby. I swear I'll do anything to make it right." Natalie closed her eyes, her voice cracking. "You can't fix something you broke this completely. I can't even look at you without seeing all the lies, and now I'm tangled in this legal mess because of you." She opened her eyes again, burning with betrayal. "Do you even know how unsafe I feel?" Lucas nodded, voice choking. I'll confess. I'll turn myself in. I just want you to feel safe again. Even if it means prison. I'll do it. Natalie looked at him hard, searching. Could he be telling the truth now, finally? There was desperation in his voice that felt real. Let me think, she said at last. I'm meeting a lawyer tomorrow. We'll see where it goes from there. Lucas opened his mouth to respond, but she stood, cutting him off. Go home, Lucas. You've done enough damage for one day. The next morning, Natalie sat across from Julia Thompson, a respected divorce attorney from Redwood City known for handling complex cases, especially those involving white-collar crimes. Aaron had come with her, waiting silently in the lobby. Natalie, tense and worn down, recounted everything. Lucas's betrayal, Camille's manipulation, and the financial records. Julia listened, typing efficiently. When Natalie finished, she leaned back in her chair and laced her fingers. Your situation is complicated, she said, but not without options. She continued. Now, as for the affair, Massachusetts, like many states, is no fault. But adultery can influence things like alimony and custody arrangements, depending on how it impacted the marriage. If there's any evidence of harm or neglect, it could weigh into custody, Julia added. Natalie nodded, her stomach nodding. The idea of a custody battle before the baby was even born filled her with dread. The thought of her child being a legal pawn, used as leverage or sympathy, made her insides twist with panic. As for the Carrington situation, Julia continued, the concern is, if Lucas is prosecuted, you might come under scrutiny simply because you're married. But if we can show you had no direct involvement and didn't benefit from any illegal activities, aside from standard household expenses, you should be in the clear. Natalie's throat felt dry. So legally, my bigger problem is financial? Julia gave a measured nod. Exactly. If Lucas's legal troubles affect his income or assets, that could leave you financially exposed. Natalie swallowed hard. What do you recommend? Julia paused, choosing her words carefully. If you're leaning toward divorce, we can file right away. That includes spousal support and, eventually, child support. The court can freeze certain shared assets while everything is sorted out. But, she added, if you think there's even a possibility of reconciliation, I'd recommend a post-nuptial agreement. It would protect you and your child, separating your finances from any legal fallout Lucas may face. But he'd have to agree and sign it voluntarily. The idea was unfamiliar. Natalie took a long breath. I never wanted to manage my marriage like a contract, she whispered, tears threatening to spill. The word postnup felt sterile, like a shield forged out of broken promises. This wasn't the marriage she'd envisioned. Julia reached across the desk with a gentle expression. I know, but in moments like this, it's not about fairness. It's about protecting yourself and your baby. That night, lying awake in the guest room at Aaron's, Natalie stared at the ceiling fan turning in slow circles. Julia's words replayed over and over in her mind. Divorce felt permanent, devastating, especially with a child on the way. Could she truly walk away from Lucas? But how could she stay? How could she ever trust a man who had not only cheated, but buried her in lies? A man who found solace in another woman while Natalie carried their child? The silence in the room pressed against her chest, filled with everything unsaid and undone. Even if she managed to forgive, could she ever believe him again? Then there was something deeper. Moral responsibility. If she exposed Lucas, others might be protected from further harm. But that decision would likely ruin him, jeopardizing child support, their financial stability, maybe even sending him to prison. Was she prepared to make that call? Did she still owe him anything? She whispered to the baby inside her, I'm so sorry. You don't deserve any of this. I wish I could shield you from all of it. Eventually, Natalie drifted into a restless sleep, haunted by twisted dreams. Camille's smug smile, Lucas's tear-streaked confessions, and the growing uncertainty of what lay ahead. The following morning, she called Lucas and told him to meet her at a quiet lakeside park near Worcester. The air was cool, crisp, and tinged with the earthy scent of pine trees. Early joggers passed by, unaware of the tension surrounding the wooden bench where Natalie sat. Lucas arrived, looking pale and subdued. I spoke to a lawyer, she said without preamble. If there's even a sliver of hope for us, I have two conditions. Lucas tensed but listened. First, she began, you sign a postnuptial agreement, one that legally separates my finances and our child's future from the fallout of whatever legal mess you've created." He opened his mouth to respond, but she raised a hand. "Second, you turn yourself in or cooperate fully with investigators about the Carrington deal. No more secrets." Lucas's jaw clenched. He chewed his lower lip and looked away for a moment before nodding slowly. "I'll sign whatever you want," he said, voice rough. "You have my word." But when she mentioned the authorities, he hesitated visibly. His hands trembled. "Do I really have to go to them?" he asked, voice dropping. "You know what that could mean, for me, for us." Natalie's expression steeled. "You chose your job and reputation over our family for months. I'm choosing our child's safety now. The only way forward, if there's one at all, is with complete transparency." Lucas looked as if he had aged a decade overnight. After a long pause, he exhaled and nodded. "All right," he whispered. "I'll do it. I'll talk to them. But promise me something," he added quickly. "If I do this, if I come clean, let me still be a father. Don't shut me out of their life." Natalie's eyes filled with tears. She didn't know what the future held, but she did know one thing. "That depends on you," she said softly. "How you act from here forward, that will decide everything." With that, she rose from the bench and walked away, leaving Lucas staring after her, his face twisted in fear, regret, and the smallest flicker of hope. True to his word, Lucas signed the postnuptial agreement. Julia Thompson had it notarized. When Natalie saw the stamp, she felt a strange mix of relief and sorrow. This wasn't how she imagined marriage, divided by legal walls, protecting herself from a man who once promised forever. Within days, Lucas, guided by his own attorney, arranged a confidential meeting with a federal investigator. He confessed his role in the Carrington scheme and handed over the key documents still in his possession. But Camille's files had already been uploaded. Natalie, relying on her journalistic instincts, had anonymously forwarded them to her contact at the Boston Chronicle, a trusted investigative reporter she'd worked with years before. Just in case Lucas ever backtracked, Natalie ensured everything was properly documented. Lucas's confession had triggered a discreet but serious federal investigation. Natalie was called in briefly for questioning, but her minor association with the financial scandal was deemed non-criminal. She walked away from that interview with a mix of relief and emotional exhaustion, watching as Lucas headed down a legal path filled with uncertainty. Weeks turned into months. Natalie continued living at Aaron's, but eventually began allowing Lucas to accompany her to a few OB appointments. As much as she wanted distance, she couldn't deny that the baby deserved a father. Lucas, to his credit, appeared genuinely remorseful, quiet, steady, and committed to being there for the pregnancy. His case dragged through legal limbo. He was released on bond, awaiting possible charges or a plea agreement. Publicly, McCarran and Doyle placed him on administrative leave. Privately, they were already preparing to sever ties should formal charges be filed. Amid the legal storm, the day finally arrived. Natalie's labor began with a rush of contractions and tension-filled corridors at Boston General. Lucas was there, pacing nervously but attentive. Aaron stood by as well, a calming presence at Natalie's side. After hours of grueling labor, Natalie gave birth to a healthy baby boy. She named him Eli Donovan. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she held his tiny body close, overcome by the purest wave of maternal love. Lucas hovered nearby, eyes glassy with emotion. For a few moments, betrayal and broken trust were washed away by the powerful arrival of new life. Natalie watched him gently touch Eli's cheek, a quiet tenderness softening his worn face. But reality wasn't far behind. As Natalie recovered at Aaron's with the baby, Lucas's legal world exploded. The Carrington case went public. Headlines, speculation, a flurry of op-eds. Lucas felt like he was standing on a ticking clock, waiting for a final judgment. Camille, for her part, disappeared. Rumors said she took a job at a firm on the East Coast. Natalie didn't care enough to investigate. Lucas made small, sincere gestures, diaper runs, late-night calls to check on Eli, but they were always overshadowed by the looming threat of jail. 3 months after Eli was born, Lucas reached a plea deal. Thanks to his cooperation, larger names in the scandal were exposed. In return, Lucas avoided prison, receiving supervised probation, massive financial penalties, and a formal bar from holding any executive position in finance. His career was over. His public image? shattered. The post-nuptial agreement protected Natalie and Eli from any of the financial damage, and while she allowed Lucas regular visits, she declined to move back in with him. She needed to see more, needed to know if he was truly rebuilding his life. Lucas took a junior accounting role at a small firm, lived modestly in a 2-bedroom apartment, and spent every free moment with Eli. His affair with Camille remained a scar, one he carried with him. But over the next year, Natalie watched, and Lucas remained steady. He began attending therapy, both individually and with Natalie, who agreed to couples counseling only because it might help Eli to have 2 parents who could at least communicate with civility. Day by day, the bitterness inside Natalie began to thaw, not into love, but into cautious acceptance. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was the first step toward reclaiming a sense of emotional balance. She never forgot the image of Camille sitting in her chair, wearing her clothes. She never fully forgave the betrayal, the deception, the humiliation. But she saw a man trying, a man willing to learn how to be a father, a man who, for once, wasn't hiding behind charm or excuses. Whether Natalie and Lucas would ever reconcile completely remained uncertain, even as Eli's first birthday arrived. But one truth stood firm: the illusions that once defined their marriage were gone. In their place was something rawer, an unvarnished understanding of each other's flaws, mistakes, and the weight of consequences. Gone were the polished smiles and scripted reassurances. In their place, hard conversations, tearful apologies, and the slow rebuilding of trust. If not as partners, then as co-parents. Their story was no longer a fairy tale, but neither was it a tragedy. It was life. Complicated, painful, full of second chances, and sometimes final goodbyes. And for Natalie, it was the beginning of writing her own chapters, not dictated by betrayal, but by resolve. In the quiet moments, Natalie would cradle Eli in her arms and remember that night, the dinner she brought to Lucas's office, only to find another woman sitting in her place. It shattered her world, and yet, it revealed a strength within her she didn't know she possessed. She didn't know if she and Lucas could ever rebuild what they once had. But she did know this. She had survived. She had fought for herself, for her child. She had learned to set boundaries, demand truth, and walk away when she needed to. Even on the days when she felt broken, she had stood back up. That, too, was something no one could take from her. And that in itself was a kind of victory, one she would carry forward, always. Ready for the next instruction or part to revise?